Good evening, everybody. Breaking news now. Special counsel Robert Mueller announcing the first charges in the Russia collusion investigation by the special counsel. 2 people indicted and arraigned as the special counsel's office last week intimated in a leak to CNN. Former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort and his longtime associate Rick Gates pleaded not guilty in federal court to money laundering, tax charges, all related to activities years before Manafort joined the Trump campaign. We'll have a full report for you here in moments. Also tonight, the United States has deployed nuclear-capable B-2 stealth bombers to the Asia-Pacific region ahead of the president's upcoming visit later this week to the region. We'll discuss the Trump administration's efforts to end North Korean provocations with Ambassador John Bolton. And NFL players once again insulting the United States, the very idea of America and our flag taking a knee during the national anthem. Gutless Commissioner Roger Goodell risking ratings, sponsorships, and merchandise sales by letting the leftist madness continue. Will the opposition cost him his job? We take all of that up here tonight. Our top story, the special counsel announcing its first indictments 5 months after opening the Russian investigation. A federal grand jury charging former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort and his business associate Rick Gates with 12 counts, including money laundering and conspiracy related to their work for a foreign government. And in a separate case, a former Trump foreign policy advisor, 30-year-old George Papadopoulos, pleaded guilty earlier this month to lying to the FBI about his contacts with Russians. Fox News Chief Washington Correspondent James Rosen with our report.
Any reaction, Mr. Manafort?
A few hours after former Trump campaign chair Paul Manafort surrendered to the FBI, he and longtime associate Rick Gates appeared before magistrate judge Deborah Robinson in federal district court, where each pleaded not guilty to 12 counts of financial crimes in an indictment unsealed by the Office of Special Counsel Robert Mueller. The indictment alleged that while lobbying for Ukrainian interests from 2006 through 2015, Manafort and Gates laundered $75 million through offshore companies and bank accounts, and allegedly took steps as late as February to continue concealing millions in unreported income.
That President Donald Trump was correct. There is no evidence that Mr. Manafort or the Trump campaign colluded with the Russian government. The second thing about this indictment that I myself find most ridiculous is a claim that maintaining offshore accounts to bring all your funds into the United States as a scheme to conceal from the United States government is ridiculous.
Manafort was released on $10 million bond, Gates $5 million, due for payment if they fail to appear for court proceedings or leave their homes for any reason other than legal or medical appointments or religious worship. Analysts noted that the charges are unrelated to the Russia collusion angle that Mueller's team was originally established to investigate.
What the special prosecutor is likely doing here is putting pressure on someone he knows was at the center or feels like was at the center of this relationship with Russia, and use criminal charges as a way of trying to get cooperation from Manafort.
Mueller also unsealed a guilty plea entered over 3 weeks ago by George Papadopoulos, a former foreign policy advisor to the Trump campaign. Questioned by FBI agents 1 week after the inauguration, Papadopoulos lied about the timing and circumstances under which he made contact with various foreign nationals last year, people he believed to be well connected inside the Kremlin.
He was a relatively junior official. So again, how much closer it brings it to the White House depends on what actually happened.
Papadopoulos signed a summary of events that stated the professor told defendant Papadopoulos, as defendant Papadopoulos later described to the FBI, that they, meaning the Russians, have dirt on her, meaning Hillary Clinton. The Russians had emails of Clinton. They have thousands of emails. However, the documents indicate the Trump campaign rebuffed this effort by the Russians, working through Papadopoulos to set up a meeting with the candidate himself. An unnamed senior campaign official was quoted in the summary as having emailed a colleague, "We need someone to communicate that DT, meaning Donald Trump, is not doing these trips."
The president, it's in his best interest, in my view, to ensure that Mueller can wrap this investigation up quickly. The more this gets dragged out, the more you see people connected to the campaign being brought in for questioning under oath.
A source who spoke with Paul Manafort twice on Saturday said as late as Saturday evening, Manafort still didn't believe he was going to be indicted. As for his associate Rick Gates, he appeared at the arraignment with a public defender because, Gates' attorney said, Mr. Gates was not given enough advance warning of his own indictment to appear with his own attorney. Outside Federal District Court in Washington, James Rosen, Fox News.
Joining us tonight with reaction to the Manafort indictment, Ed Rollins. He's chairman of the Great America PAC, Fox Business contributor. Ed, your reaction first to the Manafort Gates charges.
You know, my sense is I've known Paul for a long time. He worked for me in 1984. Paul was a very effective convention-type delegate counter. I did that for Jim Baker in the Ford campaign. He did that for me in the Reagan campaign. And he's always kind of played big-time politics in D.C. and represented a lot of foreign clients. I don't think this has anything to do with collusion. I don't think this has anything to do with Donald Trump dealing an unfair hand. So I'm not shocked by it because I've heard these stories for a long time. But I think at the end of the day, I also don't think he's going to make any case against Donald Trump.
It seems like a very easy case to either dismiss or be found guilty, and that is if he paid taxes on the $75 million, there's no effort to launder money.
This is a campaign. This is a case that could easily have been handled by the U.S. Attorney in the District of Columbia. I don't think it has to be a federal prosecutor and the head of the Justice Department to do this case. But I think at the end of the day, it certainly is going to be a big distraction, and it's certainly going to get told a totally different way in a very big week for the president, where he has the tax plan and he has at the end of the week he wants to name a new Federal Reserve. My argument to him would be, if he was listening to arguments, is go on with your business. There's nothing you. This is about Manafort and the prosecutor, and not you.
Yeah, the president has been so he's been subjected to so much antagonism, attacks outright. Since he took the oath of office, I don't think the man would recognize a distraction. It's really been remarkable. Adding this to it is, I don't know. It's irritating, annoying, and I think wrong, but there it is. Let's go to George Papadopoulos, the 30-year-old who has a master's degree from the London School of Economics and is now trading as a foreign policy advisor. Well, he was a volunteer to the Trump campaign.
Even before that, he was in the Carson campaign, and no one seemed to know who he was. I think the reality is sometimes in a campaign, and I've been in lots of campaigns, there are people who come in and try and become more important than they really are, and I think this was a case here.
Not in politics, surely.
Not in politics, and I think no one knows this person in the foreign policy community. No one thinks of him as a serious player, and I think to a certain extent he was being bravado, and he certainly was being bravado to the FBI agents, and they got him on perjury.
Again, you just have to ask yourself, why in the world would a young person, any person, but why would a young person even think of lying? I would think they would be scared stiff.
Should be.
To lie to the FBI? Are you kidding me?
That's the thing you always have to worry about when you get in these investigations, whether you're charged or not. It's the perjury, and I think to a certain extent, I think he's now being used, and I don't think he was a big player.
Well, that's part of the deal.
And I think that's the part.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Ed Rollins, thank you as always, and Ed will be back with us as we survey all of the day's events here later in the broadcast. Joining me now, former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Fox News contributor John Bolton. John, good to see you.
Glad to be with you.
These three indictments, two of them, I guess, expected, certainly one of them, that is Paul Manafort and his associate, Rick Gates. Your reaction?
Well, look, like Ed, I've known Paul Manafort for many, many years, going back before the Reagan administration. And it was my impression he, representing these foreign clients, tried to dot his I's and cross his T's. The one thing I would say about this indictment, looking at the specifics, and there are a lot of charges that flow around it, but at the center of it are a number of allegations that he had bank account X. He did not file the required foreign bank account report. He did not indicate it on his income tax return. Now, those are things that either did or didn't happen. These aren't questions of interpretation. So we'll see how his attorneys handle it. But when you put it all together, there's nothing in that indictment that I can see about representing Ukrainian political interest that anybody didn't know about in 2016 when he came on to the Trump campaign. So did they get Manafort on what I think looks like an unrelated charge, as is so typical of independent counsels? The answer to that may be yes, maybe no. But the question is, can it force Manafort to flip against Trump? Would require that Manafort know something about illicit Trump campaign activity with the Russians, as to which, at this point, there's not a scintilla of evidence.
And you're an attorney, and so's Alan Dershowitz, who says there's no crime in collusion, even if there had been collusion, as we've heard throughout. But
well,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, we have to hear more about what the collusion supposedly produced. And that brings me to Mr. Papadopoulos. And look, I don't wish anybody ill, really. This has got to be a difficult experience for him. But I remember when the Trump campaign rolled out its list of foreign policy advisors, and this young fella was mocked by the press and the Democrats because he listed on his resume as one of his achievements that he had been in a model United Nations program, as if this is a qualification to advise a presidential candidate. Now, you can't have it both ways. Either he was essentially just somebody they had found on a street corner, which is their view then, or he's a central advisor in the Trump campaign, which is their view today. Both of those views cannot be true.
Yeah, in no way was I mocking him when I pointed out his lack of experience, the fact he's a volunteer and one of a number, and had never, I believe this is correct, only once been in the same room with the presidential candidate. This is a sad showing, it seems to me, on the part of the special counsel. There does not appear to be anything new in this. There does not appear, in the case of Manafort and Gates, appear to be any connection to Russia, collusion, and President Trump. This is stunning stuff. And then they have this minnow that they brought up in a very big, expensive net, that of the special counsel, who it's unimaginable that he would know anything at all.
Well, there's press reporting that Papadopoulos wore a wire for the FBI for several months. We'll have to see what may come of that. But let me just say, since I worked for Ed Meese at the Justice Department, I have been appalled at the concept of the independent counsel. Then it was under a post-Watergate statute. Right. Now it's simply done by Justice Department regulation. These, to me, are extra-constitutional offices. They're not restrained. Nobody supervises them for fear of being accused of political interference. They can do anything they want. That in itself is an abuse of justice, whether the target is Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton.
And think of this. All of this could have been stopped by the Senate Majority Leader, the Speaker of the House, the heads of those two intelligence committees and the Judiciary Committee in the Senate. And here we are, with a Attorney General who is recused and a Justice Department being overwhelmed by a fellow who used to just be a mere FBI director. I mean, where are we headed?
Well, I think a lot of this could have been avoided if James Comey had been fired on January the 20th of this year, which is what should have happened. I do believe that the Russians tried to interfere in our campaign. They've been doing it for 70 years or more, John, close to 100. So I'm not embarrassed or ashamed at wanting to find out what the truth is there, that's what the Congressional Committee should be doing. That's why we have intelligence
agencies, isn't it?
Yeah.
To tell us what's going on. That's why we have oversight committees in the House and the Senate. Instead, they're all blocked up, with pursuing ostensibly an investigation. It is, I think those committees are laughingstocks. I really do. And the agencies, highly ineffective if they did not have the wit and knowledge and understanding that the Russians actually do mean, and I'm sure the Chinese and North Koreans and Iranians mean, and a few of our friends, mean to understand what we're doing in our elections and wouldn't mind discomforting us in any way possible. It's just the naivety, the ignorance of it all, and the stupidity is just colossal.
Yeah, look, I think there's a lot we still have to do. I just come back to the independent counsel point one more time.
Sure.
Those who are happy that he's going after Donald Trump today better watch what they say very carefully, because the next iteration of an independent counsel will be after one of their friends.
Well, let's be very clear. At this point, this has boomeranged extraordinarily with even greater velocity than anyone could have possibly imagined, and it is headed straight for the Democratic Party, the Democratic National Committee, the Obama administration, the Clinton campaign, and on the list goes. And today, Tony Podesta leaving the firm of his own name. We'll see how far this goes, because it's begun to reach vigorously into the swamp. Ambassador John Bolton, great to have you with us.
Thank you, Lou.
We're coming right back. Much more straight ahead, and nearly every iota of it will be fascinating. Stay with us. The White House spent much of the day setting the record straight on the special counsel's indictment of Paul Manafort.
Today's announcement has nothing to do with the president, has nothing to do with the president's campaign or campaign activities, everything to do with the Clinton campaign, Fusion GPS, and Russia.
The deep state and the Dems doing anything they can to distract from the real and obvious collusion of the Clintons. We take that up with Tony Shaffer here next. And NFL players continue to insult our anthem, our flag, our country. Their awful behavior has consequences. Ratings have cratered. A full report straight ahead. Stay with us. High-powered lobbyist Tony Podesta stepping down from the firm that bears his name after coming under investigation by special counsel Robert Mueller. Podesta today announced his resignation from the Podesta Group, one of several companies paid to do work for a Ukrainian organization tied to Paul Manafort as well. Podesta is the brother of John Podesta, the former chairman of the Clinton campaign. That's right, it is still a swamp. And the Obama campaign paid nearly $1 million to the legal firm that funded the opposition research group, or smear machine, behind the infamous Trump fabricated dossier. The payments began in the spring of 2016. Around the same time, the Democratic National Committee and Clinton campaign ordered that very same law firm to retain Fusion GPS. A mere coincidence? Possibly. Perhaps remotely possible, but possibly. Fusion GPS has been linked to Russia and is the target of a number of congressional investigations. Joining me now, retired Army Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer, now a senior fellow at the London Center for Policy Research. Tony, let's go to these payments, Fusion GPS, the role of these Obama, Clinton, and the DNC.
Yeah, look, to your point, Lou, this is not like a swamp. This is actually more like a 1970s porno film hot tub. I mean, that's how bad this is. I'm sorry, it's just the truth. And let's look at how this is all kind of unraveling now. And yeah, and
can we just leave it with swamp?
All right, we'll
Can
leave
we
it
do
there.
that?
So, look, what we're talking about here, not to put too fine a point on this, is espionage. The bottom line is this. By the Clintons opening up this Pandora's box, looking to find this dirt, or at least encourage the finding of it, they actually allowed for a foreign intelligence service, the Russians, to do what they always do. They fed false, misleading, and in some cases, I think, completely made up information about the president through this channel. And I think we need to treat this as an espionage issue.
That the FBI, at least among these agencies, but certainly it appears the FBI, may have played a role in actually funding the dossier.
Yes.
And secondly, we have a situation in which the agencies that should be aware of meddling, or whatever the expression, interfering with our elections, should have been aware of that and taken action.
Right.
But we know the president of the United States at that time, one Barack Obama, did absolutely nothing when he was informed that the Russians were meddling in our elections.
Because he knew, Lou, think about this, he knew what they were doing. That's why he did nothing to stop it. He knew that there would be something coming out of that relationship. Think about it. Why else would he not act when he knew that there was something going on?
There are a host of reasons, but the possibilities are narrower.
Yes.
It is that he did not want to interfere with those
Precisely.
meddling.
Precisely.
So, but what does that draw us to in the way of a conclusion?
It draws us to the fact that I believe that he was aware, as well as the other members of the intelligence community and the FBI, that something was going on behind the scenes. My theory on this, we'll see if I'm proved correct on this, is that this dossier, along with everything else regarding the Russia collusion, was meant to be the heart in a defeated Donald Trump. That is to say that they were counting on Trump being beaten. They wanted him to be dead. And let's face it, we would not know any of this had Hillary Clinton come in and put her people in the Department of Justice and into the National Security Council.
Yeah, it's hard enough to get the Department of Justice to awaken and find some level of commitment to actually getting something done in the way of an investigation of all of this.
Where the facts actually lead them, which is not to
Well, the
President
facts
Clinton.
lead us very straightforwardly and clearly and cleanly and directly to the need to investigate the Clinton,
Precisely.
the Pay for Play Foundation, the Clinton Foundation, and all of the activities of the Secretary of State and the results of what looks to be quid pro quo, whether it's Uranium One, the list goes on.
Yes, sir.
Let's turn to the Manafort charges.
Yeah.
There is clearly the suggestion as well that Manafort may have been wearing a wire. But whatever it is, under investigation, the likelihood is that he was being at least surveilled. Papadopoulos was being surveilled and wore a wire. Where does this all go? I mean, if they had something from it, you would expect them to have put that in an indictment.
It would have been, first off, it was really juicy. It would have been leaked out in some form way before now.
I mean, like the special counsel's office did Friday?
Friday, that's my point. Lou, I'm not a lawyer, but I've talked to a number who say that leaking grand jury information is a felony. Now, what does it say about justice if the man in charge of the investigation is actually doing things to break the law in a way to shape public opinion prior to the fact? So in my judgment, and we've talked about this a number of times, that leak of grand jury information justifies the removal of Mueller, whether he knew it or not. He's the chief. He's the captain of the ship. He needs to be moved out if he can't control his team. But I don't think there's anything there because they seem so desperate to get this stuff out now at this point.
Well, we'll see where we're headed.
Yes, sir.
We'll find out in short order, I believe. Tony Schaefer, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, sir.
Be sure to vote in our poll tonight. The question is, do you believe the Obama, Clinton, and DNC payments to Fusion GPS make the special counsel look especially silly as he avoids the obvious? Cast your vote on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. We'll come right back with, and follow me on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. Like me on Facebook and Instagram at Lou Dobbs. Tonight, Wall Street stocks closing lower. The Dow down 85 points. The S&P lost 8. The Nasdaq down 2. Volume on the big board, 3.6 billion shares. Consumer spending posting the biggest gain in 8 years as Americans replace cars and trucks and durable goods destroyed by those hurricanes. A reminder to listen to my reports 3 times a day, coast to coast, as well on the Salem Radio Network. Up next, NFL ratings tumble. Players continue to insult America. We'll have the full report next. NFL ratings continue to fall as player protests stretch into the 8th week of the season. Halfway. Players from 6 teams demonstrating during the national anthem yesterday, including the majority of the Houston Texans who linked arms or took a knee. Fox News national correspondent William LaJeunesse with our report.
The national anthem controversy isn't over. Sunday, Houston Texans players knelt not to protest racial injustice, but remarks by team owner Bob McNair.
We came together as a team and wanted to, send a message, and that's what we decided to do, and I'm going to stand by my brother.
Previously, the Texans were not a team that knelt during the anthem. That changed after it was reported that McNair said earlier this month at an owners' meeting in New York, quote, "We can't have the inmates running the prison." Houston players assume he was referring to them.
This is how you view us. This is, you get out of line, you're an inmate.
I'm proud of our city.
But the 79-year-old owner, who spoke earlier this year at the Super Bowl, apologized Saturday, saying his figure of speech was never meant to be taken literally, and, quote, I was not referring to our players when I made a very regretful comment during the owners' meetings last week. I was referring to the relationship between the league office and team owners and how they have been making significant strategic decisions affecting our league without adequate input from ownership over the past 2 years.
The apology is not the atonement necessary for the grievance that has been created. So, Mr. McNair, you have to do more than apologize.
I don't think the comments were right, but I do think these NFL owners have a constitutional right to protect their business and their business interests.
As for that sentiment, McNair is not alone. Cowboys owner Jerry Jones is reportedly also not happy with Commissioner Roger Goodell's handling of the national anthem controversy. League officials canceled the meeting scheduled for today to discuss McNair's comments.
William LaJeunesse reporting, and by the way, I guess that we would have to watch the owners to which McNair was referring. They'll be taking a knee, do you suppose, next week? At some point, surely the players understand that they have become the thing of caricature and really need to get over themselves very quickly, because no one even knows what they're protesting. We do know one thing. More than half of the owners have joined with Jerry Jones to seek an end to Goodell's tenure as commissioner of the league. We're coming right back with a lot more. Stay with us. New reports: the Obama campaign, the Clinton campaign, and DNC paid millions to a law firm that hired Fusion GPS, the company behind the fake Trump dossier. Just how involved were the despicable Dems in all of that? We take it up with Greg Jarrett here next. And this daring fellow doesn't need a crosswalk to get to the other side of the highway. We'll show you the video next, and we will warn you it's a little nerve-wracking. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Joining me now, Fox News legal analyst Greg Jarrett. Greg, you've been following all of this. Manafort, Gates, and Papadopoulos. A big day for the special counsel. What is your view of the sum of these parts?
Manafort engaged in alleged wrongdoing that have nothing whatsoever to do with Trump or Russia or collusion. And in a 31-page indictment, those things aren't even mentioned. These are, at its base, this is a tax evasion, tax fraud case against them. It has nothing to do with Donald Trump. The Papadopoulos thing is interesting because he basically allegedly lied to the FBI. But they didn't charge him with any underlying offense of collusion, because collusion's not a crime in political activities. It's not a crime to talk to a Russian, which Papadopoulos did. But try to explain that.
I mean, the Papadopoulos thing is out of a comic book.
Oh, it is.
And yet here he is charged with lying to the FBI of all the dumb things to do.
Yeah.
It's just stunning to me that this fellow would lie to the FBI, or allegedly do
Nixon said, you know, it's always the cover-up.
I guess it's more than allegedly. He pleaded guilty to it.
It's always the cover-up that nails you. And he's right, because people have a tendency to hedge and deceive and to lie, and they shouldn't do it, you know?
And now we've got the leak Friday from the special counsel's office to CNN, which is in and of itself should be a high crime. I'm just kidding. What is the effect of that, if any?
None, unless you find the leaker, and then, you know, you could arguably try to go after them with some sort of a crime.
Right.
But, you know, that by itself. What's also interesting to me is that here's Hillary Clinton's campaign and the DNC. They are paying millions of dollars through intermediaries to a British spy and Russian government agents. Now that is a crime.
Ostensibly to create the
dossier.
debunked dossier, which was under the charge of and auspice of GPS Fusion.
You know, it's not a crime for
Fusion GPS.
It's not a crime for Donald Trump Jr. to meet with a Russian and talk to a Russian, or Papadopoulos, but it is a crime to pay money to Russians in a political campaign, and that appears to be what Hillary Clinton did.
Do you know what I love about this right now? We're watching this come full circle. Now, from the DNC and the Hillary Clinton campaign, led by John Podesta, his brother, Tony Podesta, has just left the firm, which really ends that firm, because he is being investigated now by the special counsel, and as he put it, wants to fight it alone. You have such symmetry and circular motion in all of this that the swamp has a whirlpool in it.
Yeah, and it appears that he and his company were named as Company B in the indictment, and so obviously
you don't want to be a Company
B. No,
B.
you don't want to be Company B, not in an indictment. And so I would expect that Mueller will eventually get around to Tony Podesta in some form or fashion, because he didn't file timely as a foreign agent. And the question is, what did he do with all of his money?
But my understanding, and I would have assumed, Greg, that it would be a big deal. Not filing, according to law, that you are representing a foreign power as a foreign agent. Apparently, there have only been 6 prosecutions of this particular crime.
Yeah, generally, and by the way, companies and lobbyists thumb their nose at the law all the time. They do this all the time, and they generally get to amend belatedly their filings.
So what do you think? The solution is to put some people in the penitentiary for life for doing it?
Yeah.
Give them a lesson?
Listen, it is a law, and let's not be lax about it, you know.
Well, I'm laughing because there are only 6 prosecutions, and they only convicted one of them.
And there have been hundreds of people who violated the law.
You know, tonight, you never know. Podesta and Manafort may be laughing at all of this.
I don't think Manafort's laughing, and Podesta shouldn't be laughing because he's in legal jeopardy.
Gentlemen, you are so admonished by Greg Jarrett. Thank you very much.
Good to see you, Lou.
Please roll the video. Watch as this courageous daredevil tightropes. Did you know that was a verb? I didn't, but there it is. Across a highway in Brazil. The dangerous balancing act didn't faze him, however. He said he was more scared than he might have been otherwise, and he was afraid that he might distract the drivers below him. It's nice that he had time to be so concerned and empathetic. Up next, House Republicans looking to throw poison pills in the upcoming tax reform bill. By the way, they're doing a pretty good job of throwing those poison pills in there so far. We'll take up their latest effort to derail the tax reform initiative. Ed Rollins, here next. Stay with us. We're coming right back. The president's call for tax reform to slash corporate tax rates is proving a bit too complex for some residents of the swamp. Republican lawmakers are now considering what they call a 5-year phase-in for the corporate tax cut, meaning that rate wouldn't hit 20% until, for 5 years. A draft of the tax plan is due out Wednesday. Joining us again, Ed Rollins, Fox Business contributor. You've seen all that has happened here tonight on the broadcast. I mean, it is to me implausible that any of this could happen. $75 million wasn't reported by Manafort. $75 million he didn't pay taxes on. He didn't register as a foreign agent. You got a 30-year-old who barely can spell foreign. Well, that shouldn't be. I'll rephrase that. Who has limited experience in foreign affairs. I mean, this is a peculiar bunch to go after.
Well, but the reality is this is what Trump was about, cleaning the swamp. And both Podesta and Manafort would have been viewed, if they weren't part of the Trump campaign, meaning Manafort, they'd have been the swamp. They were the people who were always lobbying. They were the ones that were always representing foreign governments and what have you. And I think to a certain extent, the frustration the public has is like the tax bill. Why can't you get a tax bill through? You promised this, the public wants it. Why can't you get it through? And you're going to find very quickly now when the bill comes forward, all the constituencies.
Do you want me to give you some of the answers?
Beg pardon?
Do you want to give us the answer or you want me to?
I'll let you.
I'll just start with the National Association of Manufacturers, Chamber of Commerce, the Business Roundtable, U.S. multinationals with almost $4 trillion parked overseas.
The vested interest, who basically the tax bill that's there today, the multiple thousands of pages, was put there by these people who have special interest. The president's now trying to redo this bill to make it work for middle class and for small business. And I think to a certain extent, it's a close, long fight.
Speaking of the swamp, real quickly, we go back to Teneo, we go back to GPS Fusion GPS, and other firms. They disappear. I mean, they're like snakes slithering back into the high grass. Are we ever going to see the banking records of this firm? A judge blocks access to that evidence of what this firm is doing, as if it has some sort of First Amendment rights here. It's a peculiar thing. It's a smear machine.
It is always it works for those that know how to play it well, and it doesn't work for the ordinary citizen. And I think to a certain extent, they've got to get those records of Fusion. They have to figure out who has basically paid the money into that. And I think the illegalities have taken place. I think there's no question that.
Is Congress scared to death to get those records?
Yes, they are, and because some of them will be involved in it. Some of them will be involved in it. Certainly, if they're not involved in it, some of their supporters have been involved in it.
So should we get like a declaration from them? Are you pro or anti GPS Fusion? Are you for truth and transparency, or are you something else? Well, are you a swamp creature?
You got to remember, nearly half of them are Democrats, and the Democrats aren't going to do anything that basically is going to hurt their party. And this clearly
they've sure hurt their party this time.
Well, I think so. I think that's right. And I think that's why it has to continue forward. So.
Ed Rollins, great to see
Thank you,
partner.
sir.
Thank you. Up next, Special Counsel Mueller unsealing his first indictments. They have nothing to do with President Trump or his campaign or Russia particularly. I'll take up the empty claims of collusion. Fred Fleitz joins us here right after the break. We'll be right back. Stay with us. In our online poll last week, we asked you, do you believe the Republican leadership should order the House and Senate intelligence committees to put out their final reports on the Russia probe and then turn their attention to Uranium One and the Clinton collusion and corruption scandal? We've got about 97% yes on that. I thought it'd be higher, didn't you? Joining us now, Fred Fleitz, former CIA analyst, chief of staff to Ambassador John Bolton, now Senior Vice President at the Center for Security Policy. Fred, great to see you.
Good to be here.
Your reaction here, I mean, I just want to, your thoughts about what Mueller has produced in the way of indictments.
You know, Lou, there's nothing here. There may have been some financial improprieties by Manafort. This Papadopoulos guy was a low-level guy. Think about what happened in July of 2016 when James Comey interviewed Hillary Clinton. She wasn't under oath. No record was kept. There was no grand jury. And she said, I know nothing. I know nothing. What if there was a legitimate, bona fide, independent investigation, independent counsel looking at all these improprieties by the Democrats? There'd be all kinds of indictments. That's the real injustice here.
And, you know, I hadn't thought about it the way you're constructing it. Also, you're looking at the Clinton Foundation, the sequence of vast payments, $140+ million. At the same time, an entity is taking charge of 20% of U.S. uranium. That's a pretty significant and obvious quid pro quo that should be at least understood, investigated in order to understand it. It looks corrupt on the face of it, does it not?
It does. And, you know, Tucker Carlson had a big breakthrough on this. He said the Russians were trying to get influence of Hillary Clinton when she was Secretary of State and as a potential president. They were trying to buy influence for her decisions on Uranium One and influence her once she was president. Look, the Russians thought she was going to win the election. I don't care what the intelligence community says. And as you and I know, most intelligence agencies did not think Russia intervened in the election to help Trump win. It was just 3 agencies.
Well, they've been intervening in elections for some time. Most of those elections, in fact, all of those elections were not elections in which Donald Trump was participating. What is troublesome is to think that those agencies did not notify, apparently, the President of the United States about that intervention. He seemed to be utterly shocked that Russians would in any way want to meddle in American society to our detriment. This is just a farce. I mean, you listen to James Clapper lie. You listen to the DNI. You listen to John Brennan, the head of the CIA. You watch him spy on the Senate Intelligence Committee that's supposed to be providing oversight of the CIA and not a damn thing is done. This was the Obama intelligence community. It just stunk to high heaven.
I think that's right. Remember, during the campaign, there were intelligence officers saying off the record they didn't think they wanted to brief candidate Trump.
Oh, yes.
And then the dossier was briefed as part of the presidential daily brief to Mr. Trump. Now, either the intelligence community didn't know the Democratic Party was behind it, or they did know, and they briefed it to Trump anyway.
Yeah. The latter seems the more likely course because, one, despite whatever one thinks of our intelligence agencies, they are not made up of people so dumb that they wouldn't know. A fair assessment, or am I being optimistic?
Most intelligence officers are not political. They're loyal. I don't like them all being smeared because of the misdeeds of a few, but those few have done a lot of damage, and they have to be removed from the community to restore its reputation.
All right. Fred, as always, we appreciate it. Fred Fleitz.
Good to be here.
That's it for us tonight. Thanks for being with us here tonight. Congressman Jim Jordan and Dr. Sebastian Gorka are among our guests tomorrow night. We hope you will strongly consider being with us. No, let's do better than that. Let's make it a date. I'll see you tomorrow night. Good night from New York.